I know the vast majority of people probably watching live tonight have seen the Sony A95K plastered all over the description and so on, and want to know what the TV's like. And I'm going to start this very quickly by saying that this is not my review. I have had the TV a few weeks now. I am working my way through the usual tests, and these tests do take time. I'm not the type of reviewer that just opens a box, sets a product up in front of me, watches it for an hour, and then writes a review. That's not fair to the end user. It's not fair to you. And I'm an enthusiast at the end of the day. I want to know what the product's like, and I'm going to put it through as many tests as possible and use it as a TV, which, again, a lot of reviewers tend to forget that it's a TV. You're supposed to sit down and watch it. And with a lot of equipment, that can be the case. So we do try and be balanced. We use the TVs properly as a normal TV. We don't just sit and watch test patterns. I've seen that comment raised a few times. Yeah, you sit and watch test patterns, but what's it like with actual content? Well, we actually sit and watch actual content, so don't worry about that. But this is not my review. This is my first thoughts. And the thing that people are going to say straight away, and I've already seen the question asked by Christian in the chat tonight, do you go for the A95K or do you go for the cheaper Samsung S95B? That is going to be the main question that people are going to ask. What I will caveat my answer with is that there is no such thing as a perfect TV. You need to choose a TV that's going to suit you and what it is that you're looking for. Because these TVs, although they use the same technology, are really quite different in the way that they approach being a TV. And what I mean by that is that the main thing that's striking is the design difference between the Sony and the Samsung. The Samsung's a very traditional TV. It has a center stand. It raises the panel up quite a bit. You can get a sound bar in underneath. It's quite a nicely designed rectangle, but it is plastic. The build quality is not perfect. But once you've got it set up on your stand, you're probably not going to notice the build quality in any way. And like I say, it approaches being a TV the traditional way, with the stand, with the raised panel and so on. Whereas the Sony is much, almost a completely different approach to a TV. It's a monolithic block that sits flat to your surface if you are mounting it on a surface. The stand disappears. It's behind the TV. And the TV has a lean back because of that. And it's very much Sony's design language from a number of years ago, where they've gone for that monolithic design. It's a beautiful looking TV, but of course, when you got a TV like that, it's very difficult to put a soundbar underneath, for example. Now, Sony do approach things differently from other manufacturers. They use the screen as the speaker. They have the woofer built in behind, and then they also have the transducer at the top, which vibrates the screen and gives you the high frequencies and turns the screen into a speaker, which is a great approach. It's a fantastic approach. It's won many of our Editor's Choice Awards year on year because it's a very unique way of approaching it. And again, one of the things that makes sound and vision work is the sound actually coming from where that object is on the screen, and having the screen as the speaker. Sony absolutely nails that approach. Now, of course, it's never going to perform as a high quality center speaker, although you can wire it into your system as a center speaker. And it's one of these things that I've always wondered why Sony don't actually create speakers that can go left and right and surround speakers that are tonally matched to the TV. It seems like it's one of these no-brainer things that they should have come up with a number of years ago to create a surround system that works with their acoustic panel technology, but we're still waiting on that system coming along. So in terms of TVs, they're two completely different approaches in terms of the design. And again, they're two completely different approaches when it comes to picture, even though they're using the same QD-OLED panels that come from Samsung Display. Samsung Electronics have gone for the Samsung Electronics look, which is to push everything, make it look nice and bright. Draw your eye to the picture when you're standing in store. It's going to be the brightest picture in there, the most colourful. You do get the advantage of colour volume with QD-OLED, but what people need to remember is that colour volume is different to colour saturation, and Samsung push the saturation. And that's where you get issues, because you're then losing detail within colour when you push the saturation, when you push the brightness too hard. So they've gone for the overly bright, in your face, doesn't this look amazing look, which is great for 5 or 10 minutes. But if you value good picture quality where you want to see all the detail and so on, getting the Samsung to look accurate is a little bit more difficult, because even out of the box in filmmaker mode, it's too red. It pushes red too much, which again, when you're coming from a WRGB OLED like an LG, which uses the white subpixel, I've seen lots of comments that red is just spectacular on the Samsung. Well, in a side-by-side for the initial few minutes, yes, that is the case, but it gets on your nerves very, very quickly. It's wrong. It shouldn't be pushing red as much. It's great to have the color volume there, but Samsung are not presenting that as I would like to see it. And anybody that's interested in image purity and actually seeing the content as it's supposed to be seen, and why wouldn't you want to watch content as it was mastered and intended to be seen? It's a little bit too much, even in game mode and so on. You're going to spend hours trying to dial it in on the Samsung and try and get it to not clip the highlight details and so on. So again, Sony take a completely different approach. They are a company with a huge studio. They are a company with a huge professional department that make the professional cameras, that make the professional grading monitors. This is a company that's steeped in content creation as well as the products. And that's the approach that they take. And if you ask me what is the best looking image on a TV in 2022, it is the Sony. It is an amazing image. Now, I can hear a lot of people already saying, well, the Samsung's brighter and so on. And this is what we keep saying in the reviews, and I'm trying to push the point home. It's not all about the brightness. Brightness is important. Peak brightness is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. The main way is how the TV handles that and how it displays the image and how it tone maps the image. Now, a lot of people have said online, well, the Samsung can reach 1000 nits, so it's not tone mapping. No, the Samsung is tone mapping. They have dynamic tone mapping built into the TVs that you cannot switch off, and it is constantly working. It's always there. Sony's a completely different approach, and this is where you can see the differences in image quality, and this is where I think the purists are definitely going to go the way of the Sony. Those people who want to see the image as intended, they're going to go with Sony because they are doing it. I was going to say they're doing it the right way. They're doing it the right way to the standards, to the industry standards. You might have your personal preference and think, well, Sony looks odd and it's washed out, and look at this Samsung because it's so much brighter and all the rest of it. At the end of the day, our approach has always been watch the content as it was created and intended to be seen. Because if you don't do that, you're adding color that doesn't exist. You're adding extra sharpening, which Samsung does a lot of extra sharpening. Again, it cannot be defeated. Again, to make an image that instantly stands out, but where you're actually losing detail. And this is where I think a lot of the talk online needs to focus on what it is that you're actually gaining from having QD-OLED. What is the main advantage to QD-OLED? And it's not the initial overly bright, overly garish image. And I can see why people were drawn to that, and I can see why that was instantly appealing to people. But when it comes to image quality, Jules, and we're going to move on to this now, accuracy is important. It's not about 30-year-old standards and my TV is going to look crap if I set. It's about actually watching the content as it was supposed to be seen. And that doesn't mean in a dim room. You can watch in a bright room. You just adjust the image to suit the room conditions. And once you do that, you're actually seeing the content as it's supposed to be. Red is supposed to be at certain coordinates. It's supposed to look a certain way. The problem with the Samsung is it goes its own way. It creates its own thing. So that's as much as I'm going to say at the moment, because I don't want to go into measurements. I don't want to go into all the finer details that's going to be in the review. I'd rather you went and read the review. I'm definitely going to have lots of comparison pieces. I have all the major TVs here. I've got the G2, the C2. I've got the Samsung sitting next to me, the S95B. The Sony is sitting behind me on the stand there. The only issue we have is that that's a 55-inch Sony. It's all they had available. The other screens that we have purchased ourselves, they're all 65s. But that shouldn't make a major difference in terms of comparisons. We're going to do all the comparisons, and we're going to try and break it down in terms of how accurate the picture is, as well as how inaccurate some of the pictures are and the picture quality. At the end of the day, if you enjoy vivid, over-the-top images, nobody's saying that you're wrong and don't do that. If that's what you want to do, then fine. What kind of it doesn't annoy me, but what saddens me a little bit is the way that in the comment section, as soon as you mention accuracy, people jump on that as if it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. If you want to see the image as it's intended to be seen, if that's not your bag, that's fine, but don't try and talk down the way the image is intended to be, because that's there's whole industry bodies out there that say what an image should be. So if a manufacturer and their engineers think, well, we're going to push the colors and make it super bright, they can do that, because at the end of the day, they've got to sell a TV. It's the question, Jules, that comes up all the time. Well, I've got this AI processor, I've got this extra sharpening and this contrast enhancer and so on. Why are you telling me to switch it all off?
Well, I mean, as long as I mean, look, there are lots of modes in TVs, aren't there? Vivid, natural, dynamic, which do all that kind of stuff. As certainly as a professional calibrator, as a videophile that appreciates director's intent, I want at least one mode for SDR, HDR, HLG that doesn't do that stuff. And if they're doing that stuff to the most accurate mode, that's a concern.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't have to fight in order to get that kind of stuff switched off in Filmmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's as much as I'm going to cover in this podcast. I know you'd like me to go into a lot more detail, some of you out there. If you've got questions, then get the questions in on the thread. I'll certainly look at them when it comes to the reviews. I've already seen that somebody's asked a question about 1302 firmware. I will be covering that. I'll be looking at that in a bit of detail. At the minute, I've got to try and get the Sony at a certain point in terms of testing before we get into all of that. But yeah, they're two different TVs. They're coming at the same thing from different angles. They offer the end user slightly different experiences. If you're a gamer, obviously the Samsung makes more sense with its 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs at 48 gigabits per second. The Sony only has 2, and one of those is the EARC. So if you're using EARC, you've only then got one HDMI 2.1 input, unless you use an AV receiver to do your video switching, which is, that's a solution that you could use with the Sony. But again, it's coming at things at different angles, different designs, different smart platforms, that kind of thing. So they are different, and there is no such thing as a perfect TV, and it's something I'm going to say every week. But that is the case. Each TV offers the end user something slightly different, and it's about finding the one that suits you. I mean, QD-OLED is a great technology. Has it killed WRGB OLED? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because the G2, once you see the G2 calibrated, the differences are very, very subtle. And of course, the G2 is available in a 77-inch screen size. So that's something that the Sony and the Samsung can't match at the minute. So yeah, there are different TVs out there for different people. It's interesting. I'm loving it this year. There's so many nice little things to look at, and it's taken me a bit longer to do it, but there's lots of things to look at this year.